and welcome back to my channel, where I'm going to cover the Warlock's Genie class specialization from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, providing a brief description of the subclass as well as explain and set up the various features gained. The Genie subclass is called such because of the Warlock's pact between the character and a noble genie, which can be a Dao, Jinn, Ifrit, or Marid-based genie as per the table. And that table is right here on your information sheet. However, while the genies may be called noble, it is only in the sense of the kind of genie themselves, as they are related specifically to a given element, such as earth, fire, air, or water. They are, however, quite powerful, and are more than willing to enter into pacts with anyone as long as it will extend their influence and power further than if they were able to do it on their own. Which explains why a Warlock is able to make this kind of pact with such a character or creature. As such, Warlocks can end up in this kind of arrangement, and will be able to make use of that genie's power through the genie's vessel, but not in the way one might think. You don't simply rub the side of the vessel and cast a wish. In this case, the vessel is nothing more than a foci for the Warlock, and as long as the pact remains intact, the Warlock can make use of it for that purpose. As we've seen in my previous videos related to the Warlock class, these kinds of characters must select their class specialization at level 1. And this is because of the nature of where the Warlock's power comes from, as it is strictly because of the link between the Warlock and their patron, and it firmly establishes the character's ability to draw on that power even before they start adventuring. And to help move this video along, I'm going to go ahead and quickly set up a level 1 Warlock and show you how that class specialization selection works within the character wizard once I get there. So I'll be right back. So as soon as I selected the Warlock class here, this little section called Class Specialization or Select Specialization popped up. In this case, we want the Genie Specialization, so I'm going to go ahead and select that, and then I'm going to go ahead and finish the rest of this character out, and we'll be right back once I've done that. And the first feature your character will receive is called the Expanded Spells list, in this case specific to the Genie class. And this one works a little bit differently than the other expanded spell lists we've seen so far for the Warlock class. There are a couple of things that you'll want to take note of. The first is that there is this common group called Genie spells. That means that no matter what type of Genie type you take, you will be able to select one of these spells. However, there are other spells that are here that will be dependent entirely on the type of Genie you had selected as your patron. So if you chose the Dao, then these would be the spells that you could add as part of the list that you could look through to choose a particular spell of your choice. Remember, spells in this list will count against the Warlock's known spells list. All this list is giving you is an additional bunch of spells that you get to choose from while you're selecting the spells for each level as you acquire them. So at the time that you select level 1, you could theoretically choose one or both of these if you have two options to start off with, which in most cases you will, instead of going through and selecting the level 1 spells that are available in the level 1 spells list through the actual Pact Magic list. So you get a choice, and this sort of expands on that choice. There is also one other difference about these spells. These spells are not necessarily specifically for the Warlock. They can be called from different sources, such as the Druid, the Cleric list, the Wizard, or even the Sorcerer's spell list, and even the Ranger in some cases, but the Ranger pulls from the Druid and the Cleric anyway, so that's beside the point. You get the idea is that these aren't necessarily 100% specific spells for a Warlock. So if you simply drag and drop them into your spell list here, like we have here, let's say, for example, I take Detect Evil and Good and drop it into here, it will add itself to here. But if this particular spell had a saving throw that was required or a damage bonus that could be applied, it would not necessarily be set up correctly because this implies a default of charisma, but doesn't strictly state that is your charisma ability that is going to modify that spell. As a result, Warlock spells can make use of this particular default, if you will, but spells that come from other sources cannot. So my recommendation for you is to set up a Genie spell list specifically for spells that you're going to pull from this section or the section associated with the type of Genie you chose. So, for example, I may want to call this Genie spells. And now what that does is that separates this out from the rest of the spells. So Detect an Evil is now up here as opposed to being in this particular spell list. Once that's done, it will automatically convert this to an abilities group. You'll want to modify that and set this to a spell group. You will then want to set this to CHA for your charisma. Now, when you drop any spell into any of the associated Genie spell groups, it will automatically link to your charisma and override whatever the spell's default is going to be. And as I've said before, Warlock spells you don't need to do that for because they're already set up to take that into account, so you can simply get away with leaving this as it is. Now, at later on levels, let's say you've now unlocked the ability to select a second level spell slot based spell, for example, Phantasmal Force here, you can then simply drag and drop that into your Genie's spell group, and it will create a brand new group with the appropriate level, but it will go ahead and link that group together so that if you modify this ability here, it will modify both of these as opposed to just the one that you're in. Now, the last thing that I want to point out is that this level reference here is not your character level. That's actually the level of the spell. So, for example, Detect Evil and Good, I should say, is a first level spell. Phantasmal Force is a second level spell. Create Food and Water is a third level spell. This means you have to have either a second level spell slot or a third level spell slot to be able to cast these, which also means you cannot take these spells until you have unlocked that ability to do so. Now, Warlocks at level 3 gain the ability to access level 2 spell slots. At that point, and only at that point, does the second level Phantasmal Force spell, as well as any of the second level force or spells here that are inside of each of these particular Genie types, that's when they become available. Also at level 1, your character is going to gain the Genie's Vessel feature, which is intentionally given to you by your patron for the purposes of being able to make use of their power and making use of this vessel as the foci for that. It's going to be small enough that it functions as your spell focus and is something that you yourself can design. However, there are some examples that exist here that you can just simply go ahead and choose from. That's entirely up to you. Now, it doesn't matter what shape or form that you select, both of the next two options are something that your character can make use of interchangeably. In other words, you don't have to choose that you're only going to be able to use Bottled Respite, for example, or you won't have to choose that you're only going to use Genie's Wrath. You gain the ability to make use of each of these features independently of one another. In order to activate either of these features, though, you will have to be physically touching that vessel, in other words, holding your foci in your hands. And in relation to Bottled Respite, you are able to teleport into extra-dimensional space that is within the object itself. So the object is, in fact, a container. And when that happens, you will appear in a room that is approximately 20 feet around and 20 feet high, and roughly in the shape of the object that you have chosen. So if you selected an urn, for example, then when you're inside that extra-dimensional space, it will be in the form of an urn, specifically the inside of that urn. However, while that room is large enough to handle party members, sadly, at this stage in the game, you can't bring in a party with you. You can only bring your own character at the time that you choose to enter the vessel. This is going to require a full action to do so, but when you decide to leave the vessel, you can do so through the use of a bonus action. So you could theoretically enter and exit the vessel in the same turn. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but it is theoretically possible. But you can also be expelled from that vessel if you have died, the vessel itself is destroyed, or if you remained in the container or the extra-dimensional space room, if you will, for the duration permitted at the character that your level has, which in this case would be 2 hours because it is linked to your character's proficiency bonus. And at later levels, you will be able to stay in it as high as or as long as 6 hours. Everything your character is carrying is transported in with you, and you can choose to leave some items inside of that container when you leave. So for example, if you had a backpack on you and you chose to leave it in the vessel before you exited, it will be there when you go back in to get it. You should, however, keep in mind that once you've entered that chamber and you decide to leave it, you can't get back into it until you've completed a long rest. And you should also keep in mind that taking a bag of holding in with you would be very, very bad. At the time that your character leaves the vessel, regardless of whether it was by choice or you were forced to do so because the vessel was destroyed, you will appear somewhere near where that vessel was located at the time that you exited it, and land safely on the ground. It will sort of have you about a centimeter or two above the location where it's going to place you, and then you drop and you're there. But if there are any items that are inside of the container and that container happens to be destroyed, they will also appear unharmed in an area that is approximately 30 feet around, closest to the vessel that they can get at it. So it will, if you had a sword, for example, or a backpack, or both, then what will happen is when that vessel is destroyed, the sword and the backpack will appear on the ground next to where the vessel was destroyed, and they will be in an area that is roughly within 5 feet of where that vessel is. In relation to the Genie's Wrath, you can add extra damage equal to your character's proficiency bonus once per turn. And based on the kind of Genie you selected, it will be a different type of damage. So for a Dao, it's going to be bludgeoning damage. For a Jinn, it's going to be thunder. For an Ifrit, it's going to be fire. And for a Merid, it's going to be cold damage. So before we continue, I'm going to go ahead and add this to our character's action sheet. And in this case, I'm going to create a new group called Genie. And I'm going to first name it Bottled Respite. And the reason why I'm going to do that is because this is going to require a long rest in order to be able to reuse this feature. So I'm going to set up the preparation for 1 daily use. Now, the other option doesn't require a rest of any kind, but what we do need to do is add in the damage bonus that you can add to your particular character. So I'm going to drag this into place again, move this down into that Genie group, and I'm going to rename this to Genie's Wrath. And then I'm going to add in a new damage effect, and I'm simply going to make use of this one. So it's going to be a damage type. It's going to be your proficiency bonus. So what we are looking for is this, PROF, and then it's going to be the type of damage. So in this case, let's say that I chose an Ifrit. That means I was going to be doing fire damage in this case. Now remember, it'll be cold, thunder, or bludgeoning for the other 3 types. And this will increase over time as your character continues to level up, because it's directly related to your proficiency. Now, before we move on to the next feature, I want to close off a few extra points about this particular feature. The vessel itself can be destroyed, as I've already stated a couple of times. It will have a number of hit points equal to your character's Warlock level plus your character's proficiency bonus. But it does have immunity to poison and psychic damage. However, all other types of damage can harm the vessel, so it's a good idea to protect it and carefully guard it. However, if it does get destroyed, don't worry. You can replace it by completing a 1-hour-long ritual, where your character is essentially requesting another vessel from your patron. And it can be done so during either a short or a long rest. There's no penalty to that. You will still get your rest bonus in addition to being able to reacquire your vessel. At Warlock level 6, your character will gain the Elemental Gift feature, and it's where your character gains resistances to the damage type associated with the patron which you have selected, and it's a permanent change. You will also gain a flying speed of 30 feet that will last for 10 minutes, and you can hover in between rounds. This can be used as a bonus action, and it can be used a number of times that are equal to your character's proficiency bonus, at which this level should be 3 uses for the time being. However, once all uses are expended, your character will need to complete a long rest in order to regain those spent uses. Now, we don't need to track much other than the duration, so we're going to want to add this to our character's action sheet, move it down into our group for the Genie, and I'm going to add essentially what's classified as a tracking effect. And what this is it's literally just going to be something called Elemental Gift, but it's going to be there to track its duration and the fact that it can only go on your own character. We are also going to want to ensure that we set up the number of uses. In this case, it is a number of uses equal to your character's proficiency bonus, which at this level is 3. So you can see here that we now have 3 uses. You're going to want to add another effect here. In this case, I'm calling it, once again, Elemental Gift. But in this case, I'm putting a semicolon, resist, colon, and then the type of damage. So if you selected a Dao, you would want to put bludgeoning here. If you selected a Jinn, you would select thunder. For an Ifrit, you would add fire, which is the one that I've chosen. And for a Merid, you would select cold. And once again, this goes on your character. But it does not expire, so you don't need to worry about that. So, once your character is dropped into the combat tracker, the very first thing that you can do is select this. And that is strictly for that. When you choose to move 30 feet, as at the time that you activate this feature, It lasts for about 10 minutes, and at that time, and only at that time, will you add in this particular feature, because it will now have a duration there. And that is going to allow you to essentially track how long your ability to fly up to 30 feet will last. That's literally all it's going to be. In fact, I could actually even clarify this a little bit more for flying speed. And now, all you have to do is clear out the old effect there and drop in the new one. And it will tell you that it's for your flying speed and the duration of how long that lasts. Now, because I had gone through and made use of this feature, all I have to do is tick that off and away we go. At Warlock level 9, you're going to want to ensure that you make your adjustment for the number of uses for Elemental Gift. And that is because our proficiency bonus is increased from +3 to +4. So that means going to our action sheet here, selecting Preparation, and adjusting 3 to 4 for daily uses. And that's all you have to do to actually set that up for that extra use. At Warlock level 10, your character is going to gain the Sanctuary Vessel, which now finally gives your character the means to enter the vessel and pull in up to 5 willing characters or creatures with you when your character makes use of the Bottled Respite feature. As a new added bonus action, your character can choose to eject one or more of the creatures that are also in the container with you, but if your character leaves or dies within the container, then everyone is going to be ejected automatically. The same will happen if the vessel is also destroyed, so the entire group, including your own character, will be ejected, and you will all safely land within an area that is in close proximity to where that container was actually sitting, or floating, or hidden, doesn't really much matter. And then once you're there, you can either pick up your bottle if you've left voluntarily, or if it was destroyed, you would then have to begin the ritual of replacing it. Another change is that any creature, including your own character who is within that vessel while trying to complete a short rest, will only have to remain in the container, or the extra dimensional room, for a total of 10 minutes before gaining that benefit, thus saving about 50 minutes or more on a normal short rest, depending on how long your DM considers a short rest to last. If anyone uses a hit die while they are completing that rest inside of the container, they will be able to add your character's proficiency bonus to the total amount of hit points they gain while rolling those hit dice, as long as the group is completing a short rest within that container. Now, normally I would not add a feature like this to our action sheet, but because there is something here associated with hit point recovery, I'm going to, just to make it a little bit easier so that other players don't have to know what your proficiency bonus is. You can simply drop a healing component on top of them. So I'm going to add in a healing ability here. It's not going to be on only your character. It will be for hit points, but it's going to be associated with your proficiency. So we just want to look for PROF. And as we can see here, that's 4. So as your character levels up, it will eventually max out at 6. And the way this will work is that when your party is inside of a particular vessel, specifically yours, and you're completing a long rest, as long as that character is rolling hit die to recover any hit points, when they're done rolling the hit die, you would drop an additional number of hit points on that particular ape or creature or character, whatever, it doesn't much matter. So in this case, they would gain 4 additional hit points. But all you have to know is who's doing it. That way you can drop the appropriate number of hit points on each of those characters. At level 13, you are once again going to be required to increase the number of uses for Elemental Gift, because your proficiency bonus is going to go from +4 to +5. So once you've acquired that level, all you have to do is go to your Actions tab as normal, set your action sheet here into preparation mode, and make the modification from 4 to 5 for Elemental Gift. Now we can see that we have 5 uses. At Warlock level 14, your character will gain the Limited Wish feature, allowing your character to call upon their patron and apply the effects of any level 6 or lower spell that has an action-based casting time. This means that spell has to be one you'd be able to cast in the course of an action during a combat encounter. This spell does not have to be one from the Warlock spell list and can be from any class of spell, be it Divine or Arcane, and your character will not need any components even if it has a cost requirement. The effects of the spell take effect immediately, and once you've cast it, your character will be unable to make another request like this from their patron for a total of 1d4 long rests, which is rolled at the time that you cast the spell. And it is not unusual for something like this when dealing with wish-related spells. So in this particular case, there really isn't a need to add it to the action sheet. What you will want to do is create a note for how many long rests you need to complete in order to actually regain the use of it. So from that perspective, and only from that perspective, would I consider adding this to our action sheet. And the way that I would do that is that, let's say that I haven't used it yet. So I have 0 rests needed. Now let's say that I have gone through and used it. I would pick up a 1d4 and roll it. So in this particular case, I would need to complete 3 long rests in order to actually go through and regain the ability to use that wish spell. Once you've completed a long rest, you decrement the number of rests remaining. And then when you complete another one, you do so again. And then when it reaches 0, it means you now have the ability to use it. It's not the best way to track it, but it adds that functionality right into your action sheet. You don't need to worry about making use of the notes entries somewhere else, or even a notes entry here on your character's notes tab. As for the spells themselves, the best way to actually go ahead and do that is simply to pop open the spells table here and select the level that you want to cast. So you can go up to level 6. So anything that shows up in this list of spells, doesn't matter what source it's from, is something you can use. Same with level 5, level 4, level 3, level 2, level 1. So it's level 6 through level 1 that you gain this ability. The final thing that you have to do when your character reaches Warlock level 17 is once again make the adjustments for Elemental Gift for the number of uses. And that is because your proficiency bonus is increased from +5 to +6. So once you've acquired the level, you'll want to go to your Actions tab and modify the number of uses here by selecting the Preparation mode and changing the 5 to a 6. And this is definitely a different take on the Warlock class, and while it does not gain much in the way of punch, as most of the feature benefits are primarily around the Sanctuary, it does gain a few defensive capabilities that should help with survivability and keep you in the fight a little longer. However, these things are still going to be quite useful for the party once your character is leveled up, and could even help get everyone out of a tight situation with the right placement and luck. But this does bring us to the end of this video, and I hope you found it useful and informative, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. I wish to thank you for taking the time to watch this particular video. I hope you found it informative and useful to familiarizing yourself with Fantasy Grounds in general, and that you had fun in the process. If you found the video useful and you liked the content of the particular video, go ahead and click that like button to let me know. And if you have any questions specific to the topic covered by this particular video, or just have some comments in general, please feel free to post something in the comments section, and I will do my best to respond to any questions that are asked. Additionally, I do release content quite regularly, and it's generally specific to Fantasy Grounds or 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons at this time. So if you'd like to be notified when new videos come out, go ahead and subscribe and click the notification bell to ensure that notification is sent to you when I release a new video.